Jack the Ripper, the killer who vanished. Part 3, The Last Victim, and the mystery that refused to die. So imagine you're a detective. You've got an entire city living in fear. You've chased hundreds of leads, questioned thousands of people. You've even got letters from someone claiming to be the killer. Then, the murders suddenly stop. No arrest. No confession. No body of the suspect. Just silence. And that's exactly why Jack the Ripper became the most famous unsolved serial killer in history. Now here's the thing. By early November 1888, London was exhausted. Every newspaper had the murders on its front page. Every pub had people arguing over who the killer might be. The Metropolitan Police had increased patrols across Whitechapel. Detectives were working around the clock. Rewards had been discussed. Citizens formed neighborhood patrols. People genuinely believed the next murder would finally lead police to the killer. Unfortunately, it didn't. Because on the morning of November 9th, 1888, one of the most horrifying discoveries in British criminal history was made. The victim was Mary Jane Kelly. She was believed to be about 25 years old, making her younger than the other commonly recognized victims. Unlike the others, Kelly wasn't found in a dark alley. She had rented a tiny single-room home at 13 Miller's Court, just off Dorset Street. It wasn't much. One cramped room. A bed. A fireplace. A table. A broken window patched with clothing. But at least it gave her a roof over her head. The night before, neighbors reported hearing Kelly singing. Others claimed they saw her walking with a man. As with many witness accounts from the case, details varied and couldn't all be confirmed. Then, the next morning, her landlord sent someone to collect overdue rent. The door was locked. A window offered a view inside. The man looked through it and immediately realized something was terribly wrong. Police were called. When officers entered the room, even seasoned investigators were deeply shaken. Kelly had been murdered inside her own room, where the killer had privacy and time. Contemporary reports described the scene as exceptionally brutal. Unlike the earlier murders in the open streets, this attack happened indoors, giving the killer much longer before anyone would interrupt him. The room itself became one of the most photographed crime scenes of the Victorian era. Those photographs still exist today and remain among the most studied pieces of evidence in the case. The murder stunned London. Many investigators believed the killer had reached the peak of his violence. And then, nothing. No more murders that investigators could confidently attribute to Jack the Ripper. Just silence. Now here's where the mystery really begins. People naturally asked, why did the killing stop? Some believed the murderer had died. Others thought he had been arrested for an unrelated crime. Some believed he had been committed to an asylum. Others argued he simply left London. The truth is, nobody knows. And that's what has kept this case alive for well over a century. Over the decades, more than 100 suspects have been proposed. One theory pointed to Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-born barber who later entered a mental institution. Some modern authors have suggested he may have been the killer, but historians and forensic experts remain divided, and no consensus has been reached. Another suspect was Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher whose death shortly after the murders fueled speculation. However, the evidence connecting him to the crimes is largely circumstantial. There was also Michael Ostrog, a career criminal. George Chapman, later convicted of poisoning women. Even Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor who left England during the investigation. Over the years, even more sensational theories appeared. Some accused members of the royal family. Others blamed famous artists, doctors, Freemasons, secret societies. Most of these theories rely on speculation rather than strong evidence. Modern forensic science has also entered the debate. From time to time, headlines claim that DNA has finally identified Jack the Ripper. Those claims usually involve items said to be connected to the crimes, such as a shawl reportedly linked to Catherine Eddowes. But here's the important part. Those findings remain highly disputed. Experts have questioned whether the items were truly connected to the murders, whether they were contaminated over the decades, and whether the DNA analysis can support such definitive conclusions. As of today, Jack the Ripper's identity has never been officially established, and that's something a lot of people don't realize. The mystery is still a mystery. Now think about how different this investigation would be today. Security cameras would track movements. DNA could identify a suspect. Cell phone records would map locations. License plate readers. Digital payments. Facial recognition. Victorian detectives had none of that. They relied on witness statements, boot prints, newspaper reports, and instinct. Despite interviewing countless people and following hundreds of leads, they never found enough evidence to identify the killer beyond reasonable doubt. Jack the Ripper's legacy isn't just about one unidentified murderer. The case changed policing. It exposed weaknesses in crime scene preservation. It highlighted the importance of coordinated investigations. It also showed the enormous influence of newspapers on public opinion, as sensational headlines fueled fear and sometimes spread rumors faster than facts. And perhaps most importantly, it forced people to pay attention to the terrible living conditions in Whitechapel. Many of the victims had been overlooked by society long before they became victims of a killer. Today, museums, historians, and walking tours continue to examine the case, not to glorify the murderer, but to understand the crimes, the investigation, and the lives of the victims. Because that's the irony. Almost everyone remembers the name Jack the Ripper. Far fewer remember Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Those women were more than victims in a famous mystery. They were real people whose lives ended in unimaginable circumstances. And after more than 130 years, the identity of the man who killed them may never be known. He disappeared into the streets of Victorian London, leaving behind one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. Somewhere in those crowded, foggy streets, someone knew exactly who Jack the Ripper was. They just never lived long enough, or never chose, to tell the world. That's it for the Jack the Ripper case. What a story. Wish we knew who he was, so justice can be served for the victims. See you in the next story.